Welcome to our explainer on the absolute most critical, yet wildly misunderstood, regenerative process in human biology, sleep. Today, we're diving deep into a systems biology approach. We aren't just going to rehash basic sleep hygiene here. We're reasoning from first principles to uncover the hidden neurological, metabolic, and molecular gears that govern how you recover and, honestly, how you age. To really grasp the stakes here, we have to look at the data: 70.1 million. That's the staggering number of American adults currently sleeping 6 hours or less per night. We're literally living through a modern crisis of chronic sleep deprivation. And biologically speaking, this is not just about feeling groggy the next day. This massive deficit is fueling metabolic dysregulation, systemic inflammation, and accelerated cellular aging. So, how do we actually fix it? Let's get into Chapter 1, the architecture of rest. To fix our broken sleep, we first have to understand the fundamental biological forces that literally compel our brains to shut down. Your sleep architecture is dictated by a profound biological collision known as the two-process model. First, you've got process S, which is your homeostatic sleep drive. Think of it as a physical buildup of the neurotransmitter adenosine the longer you stay awake, kind of like pressure building in a pipe. Then there's process C, your circadian rhythm, which is regulated by environmental light detected by your suprachiasmatic nucleus. Deep restorative sleep only happens when these two systems perfectly align. Now, what's truly fascinating is how the brain actually executes this transition into sleep. It relies heavily on these wake-promoting cells called orexin neurons, located right in the lateral hypothalamus. While you're awake, these guys are highly active, keeping you alert. But to initiate deep, slow-wave sleep, your brain actually has to physically silence them. Which brings us to Chapter 2, Diet and Brain Chemistry. Surprisingly, the silencing of those wake-promoting neurons is tied directly to the molecular cascades triggered by what you put on your plate. Every single night, your body has to execute a very strict biochemical pipeline. It starts sequentially with the amino acid L-tryptophan from your diet. That tryptophan has to be transported across the blood-brain barrier. Once it's inside, it gets synthesized into serotonin, and ultimately it's converted into the sleep hormone melatonin. If you're missing the nutritional building blocks, this entire biological assembly line completely breaks down. But here's the catch. This pathway has a severe biological bottleneck. A whopping 98% of the tryptophan circulating in your blood is bound to serum albumin. That leaves only a tiny fraction, just 1 to 2%, in a free form that's actually capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier to fuel your sleep chemistry. It's like a massive traffic jam right outside the brain. And this reveals a highly counterintuitive mechanism for how diet actually influences sleep. Consuming high glycemic carbohydrates triggers a blood glucose response that acts as a profound chemical switch. High blood glucose actively inhibits and silences those wake-promoting orexin neurons we talked about earlier, biologically ushering you right into slow-wave sleep. Let's move to Chapter 3, Calming the HPA Axis. Human physiology is a massive system of complex trade-offs, and even if you have the perfect neurochemical building blocks, a hyperactive stress response will completely override your biological drive to sleep. The primary saboteur here is the HP axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is basically your body's central stress response system. When this axis gets chronically dysregulated because of our modern high-stress lifestyles, it results in inappropriate nighttime cortisol spikes. Cortisol's an alertness hormone. If that spikes at night, it literally destroys your ability to initiate and maintain deep sleep. This is exactly where targeted nutritional interventions become game-changing. Supplementing with highly bioavailable magnesium glycinate acts as a biological brake pedal on this system. It drastically improves HPA feedback and neutralizes those sleep-destroying cortisol spikes, which is absolutely huge for preventing those frustrating midnight awakenings. And the glycine component of that supplement is just as powerful. Acting as an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it binds to NMDA receptors in the suprachiasmatic nucleus to induce peripheral vasodilation. Simply put, it physically drops your core body temperature, which is a mandatory, non-negotiable metabolic trigger for you to fall asleep. On to Chapter 4, the gut-brain sleep axis. We're finding that the regulation of your nervous system extends far beyond the brain, reaching deep down into your gastrointestinal tract. We are increasingly realizing just how heavily sleep is modulated by this gut-brain axis. Your gut microbiome ferments dietary fiber into short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, like butyrate. These SCFAs enter your systemic circulation, cross the blood-brain barrier, and directly signal the vagal nerve to modulate and control your brain's hypothalamic sleep networks. Literally, your gut bugs are talking to your brain's sleep centers. How wild is that? But this system is incredibly fragile. Chronic sleep deprivation actively destroys your intestinal barrier, causing gut dysbiosis by increasing firmicutes and compromising your tight junctions. However, remarkable new studies are showing that vitamin D3 supplementation can actually reverse this damage, restoring your microbial balance and repairing those crucial tight junctions. The scientific literature really highlights vitamin D3 as a profound immunomodulator. It isn't just about bone health. It actively reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines and works synergistically with melatonin to stabilize your circadian rhythms. It basically acts as a biological shield during periods of sleep disruption. Finally, Chapter 5, Saboteurs and Strategic Recovery. Because all of these perfectly orchestrated biological mechanisms can be instantly derailed by one highly normalized evening habit. We really need to look closely at the mechanisms of alcohol. A lot of people use it to wind down, mainly because it mimics insomnia medications by acting as a sedative, promoting early slow-wave sleep. But man, it comes with massive biological trade-offs. It violently suppresses restorative REM sleep, the exact phase you need for memory and cognition. And as the alcohol wears off, it triggers a severe withdrawal effect known as rebound insomnia. That is exactly why you might find yourself suddenly wide awake staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m.
Furthermore, alcohol functions as a really potent muscle relaxant. This causes the muscles of your upper airway to become floppy and actually collapse. Not only does this cause severe snoring, but it amplifies obstructive sleep apnea, literally starving your brain of oxygen throughout the night and leaving you completely metabolically exhausted the next day.
So to protect your delicate sleep architecture and your long-term metabolic health, the biological data provides a very clear protocol. If you do choose to drink, you absolutely must finish any alcohol consumption a minimum of 3 to 4 hours before getting into bed. You have to give your body that buffer to clear the sedative and minimize that REM suppression. When we view sleep not just as rest, but as a highly integrated system involving the HPA axis, gut microbiota, glucose metabolism, and neurochemistry, it changes everything. The science gives us the blueprint. The rest is really up to you. So as you evaluate your own nighttime routines, you are left with one critical question to think about. Are your daily habits feeding a cycle of biological exhaustion, or are you strategically engineering your inputs to optimize your nervous system's most critical restorative process?